Alrighty then. We'll move on and finish with Chicago for today's episode, who for the 11th time in the last 13 seasons have missed the playoffs. They are watching the playoffs from their couch. I would struggle for you to find a team that's had a worse run, not just in MLS, but in football in general, of being in a position of success for, however you define success, right? Um, and the reward for the people who are in charge of this team is a shiny new contract up in the front office. They finished on 40 points after losing to New York City on the final day and boasted a minus 12 goal differential behind the play of U22 players like Chris Brady and Brian Gutierrez. The team felt short yet again. What went wrong? And I am going to start with the awful contracts to awful players. And this isn't a secret. The Fire have had boatloads of money tied up in very underperforming players. First and foremost, Xherdan Shaqiri, always listed in this conversation as one of the highest earners in the league, near $10 million a year, usually top five, especially with Messi now coming in and things like that. And the reward for all the money you have given him is 5 goals, 4 assists, in just over 2,000 minutes this year. It's just not good enough for somebody like, I think that those numbers are like what Omir Fernandez gave us this year. So if you want to compare and contrast, right? DP number 2, Jairo Torres, the Mexican international, joining on a $6 million move from Atlas in May 22. His return on investment has been 0 goals and 0 assists in 41 games. And in those 41 games, he has not even hit 1,700 minutes. You paid $6 million for a guy who has not given you more than 1,000 minutes a year for the last 2 years. 0 goals, 0 assists. It is brutally unacceptable. Their third DP is probably the best pick of the lot in Ousmane Doumbia, and he's just been average. He'll be bought down this offseason to open up a space. But in a league like MLS, where you have to get DP signings right because you don't have other ways to bring in top talent yet, they have swung and missed badly, and they've left themselves open for massive, massive issues. It is unbelievable that this office has gotten a new contract. But I'll get to that in a little bit.
I didn't even realize they got a new contract.
It was yesterday. They got it, or like 2 days ago.
That is pretty poor.
Yeah, I'll find the tweet.
So you basically took my exact first point, like literally, like word for word, my first point. Because my first reason why was because they needed to get more out of their designated player spots. And I said that, I think Shaqiri was a great get for them when they brought him in. It was a player who had proven it at some of the biggest clubs in Europe, coming over at only 31. It was the right move to make. But since he's been here, it has been entirely underwhelming. And I'm sure some of it is probably on the club and some of it is on Shaqiri himself. But whatever the reason is, he has not hit the levels we expected of him. And then Jairo Torres, I mean, where do you even start there? You covered, I think, pretty much all of it. It's the only thing I will add on top of what you added, besides the massive price, no goals or assists from an attacking player across all the minutes he's played so far, which hasn't been too many, but still, is that he was also taking up a designated player spot for 2 seasons. You could have had somebody else in that spot who could have produced. I mean, like, literally, someone could have fell down and accidentally produced more than he did. And then, as you mentioned, I maybe you can give me if there's more context or not on Doumbia, but it looked like it was just a loan from the summer transfer window. So I was seeing that the loan was done. So I don't know if he's necessarily coming back unless you saw something.
I didn't. I thought it was I knew it was a loan, but there was a mention of it becoming permanent and then buying him down. So that's what I was assuming that may happen. Like I'm just spitballing here. Either way, he won't be a DP next year. That's kind of
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think bringing him in as a DP for that half of the season, it made sense. You bring him, use the spot, bring him in, make that push for the playoffs. But I think it's safe to assume that he's not gonna occupy another designated player spot next year, and nor do I think he should. I don't think that um, in MLS 4.0 you should be using a designated player spot on a 31-year-old who's been playing in the Swiss league his whole career. Not that that's like a bad thing, but I think MLS 4.0 we're looking for Xherdan Shaqiri-esque players with a background like that in Europe, or young South American players. The only thing I will give credit for to Chicago is that at least it seems like they try to occupy their designated player spots and they try to make the right moves, as opposed to a team like Montreal or Colorado who just doesn't try at all. So I think the solution is that, I while I appreciate that they are making an attempt to get good designated players for their team, I honestly I feel like the only thing they can do is just to keep trying it. Eventually you will hit on some of them. I think they're building a good youth system to accompany the stars. Now, if you could find the right stars to put in place, I think you're looking at a strong team.
Yeah, there are a lot of things I got to fix. I just found the tweet. They extended their sporting director in George Heights and the technical director Sebastian Pelzer. So I'm going to get to that in a second. But the first thing I want to talk about is the culture of this group, which I think is a massive issue. It feels like it's got the culture of people walking around being like, it's Chicago. We're always going to miss the playoffs. It feels like the Jets for the last decade. Like, oh, we won a couple games, but that doesn't mean anything because the Patriots are here or the Bills are now here. It's like it's never us, so why do we care? And that's unacceptable for first of all a pro group, but a group that has had so much success in the past, right? It feels like you have some players who are showing up because they get paid money and they like to play the game and they leave without knowing what it means to the club, to the community, what the shirt means, right? You're talking about a group that on the end of match day 36, with 2 games to go, sat in eighth place and needed one win or two ties pretty much to lock it up. I mean, there were some scenarios where that might not have been enough, but regardless, in their last 2 games with the playoffs on the line, they didn't score a single goal and they lost to two teams that were fighting for the same exact spot that they were fighting for. They couldn't get off the couch to play a team that was fighting to knock them out of the playoffs. It's like that stuff is just unacceptable to me as a player, as a coach, as a former captain, right? Is that stuff doesn't sit well with me. If my guys don't show up in a game where we know it's win or go home, it just feels brutal. Um, I think they need a leadership change in the locker room, whether it be to knock some players out, to do a full reset. I don't know, but there is something going on in that locker room where the people aren't motivated to play for the badge, and that's not acceptable.
My next point for them is on home support. So I think this is somewhat similar to the situation with NYC. However, the difference is that this team actually has a home stadium. The problem is that they don't get any home support. Chicago, the city itself, has 2.7 million people, and yet the attendance is constantly some of the lowest in the league. And I think it shows in their home form as well. I mean, they finished the season with a 6-4-7 record at home, which is just not good enough to make the playoffs. The top 7 teams in the East won at least 9 games at home. So if they want to be one of those teams, they need to improve their home record. The solution's a little tough on this one. I'm not too sure how to get more out of the fans coming to the stadium and backing the team. I think some of it will just come naturally with the progression of the league and the sport in the country, plus the Messi effect. However, I think the rest likely comes from either better results on the field or bringing in more notable names to join the club.
For me, it comes. You mentioned the notable names. That's massive, right? It's bringing in people that people want to watch and then getting the results on the field. Like when Shaqiri came, it was a big deal. Everybody wanted to watch Shaqiri. Then when they realized Shaqiri didn't give a damn and the team sucked anyway, they stopped again. Right? There's rumors of Robert Lewandowski coming to a massive uh, Polish heavy area. That's massive. You're going to get massive crowds for that. But if they still suck, you're not going to keep them when he leaves, and that's the problem. Right? It's the same thing with the Messi deal, right? If you're going to watch Messi and you know that your local team is playing them and you spend X amount of hundreds of dollars to go watch him and you realize your team still sucks. Like once Messi leaves, what's the point of going back if you know they're not good?
Yeah, and you could bring in the big names, and that will definitely help draw in a crowd. But you don't even necessarily have to do that. I mean, look at Atlanta. Before when they first started and they were signing guys like Josef Martinez and Miguel Almiron. No, I guarantee you, maybe, and this is probably being generous, 1% of Atlanta fans knew who they were. But because the team was so successful and fun to watch, they became household names in the league, and everybody in Atlanta knew who they were.
That's also fair. I think you have to compare, new expansion. It's new, it's shiny. I want to be around it versus team that's had a decade worth of failure. So I think those also come into it. But no, I don't disagree with your point there. But for me, now I'm going to dive into this disgustingly loathsome front office work. So I just mentioned that they haven't made the playoffs in 11 of the last 13 years. They haven't made it since 2017. There hasn't been a group on that field that has resembled anything of a winning club since, any of these guys took over. And on the 14th of November, sporting director George Heitz and technical director Sebastian Pelzer both signed contract extensions. Um, just to give you a feeling for how the response went, when they announced George Heitz, the contract extension on Twitter, 64 likes, 161 quote tweets, and 179 comments. Not a single one of them positive. It is shambolic. And a lot of the quote tweets are spot on. This is MLS 1.0 mediocrity manifesting in 2023. It is unbelievable that in a league where we are bringing in some of the best players in the world, some of the most fun attacking football in the world, where the only thing that people will ever try and hang their hat on is there's no consequences. There's no consequences without pro rel. There's no consequences, no consequences. To turn around and be like, hey man, we haven't made the playoffs in 13 years. Why don't you come back for another three? Maybe we'll get it right this time. It doesn't look good on the league. It doesn't look good on the club. And it must suck to be a supporter of Chicago right now, because when you hop on Twitter and see a club like Red Bull who have their owners coming out and being like, yeah, we made the playoffs for the last 14 years, still not good enough. We're going to come out and we've been bad about it for the last 4 years. We haven't spent the money we were supposed to do. We haven't given you a reason to show up to stadium. It's our fault. We're going to fix it. And then they start getting linked to players. Granted, are coming from a connection that we have that, Chicago might not necessarily benefit from directly. I'm not going to try and hide that. But the fact that you're over there and you're seeing clubs like us who have been successful in the terms of making the playoffs for 14 years and then saying it's not good enough, we're going to do better. Then you turn around and look at your club who hasn't made it more than 2 times in the last 14 years. And they're going to be like, yeah, we weren't great, but we're moving in the right direction and we're going to get there eventually. I think that was the phrase that they used was, we'll get there eventually. I would throw a chair if I was in a room when I heard somebody said, yeah, don't worry about it. 13 years, we'll get there eventually. How much longer do we have to wait for this club to go back to what it used to be? We're going through MLS history on our series right now, and Chicago was the pillar. Chicago was the club. They were nearly the first team to win a treble. They were nearly one of the best dynasties in the league. And now they're 13 years without a playoff, and we'll get there eventually. It's a slap in the face to the originals who supported them through the expansion. It's a slap in the face for the people who have been there for the double winning season, who have then stuck around through the heartbreak, the agony, all of the pain that they've gone through, just for you to tell them, oh, be patient, we'll get there soon. I don't support Chicago in the slightest, and this is infuriating for me. They better be looking to make some big changes soon in that front office to reward whoever just gave them a new contract. Because if they're just going to sit there on their hands and be like, oh, we tried, and nothing's going to come out of it, there's going to be a revolt on Chicago. You know, they need to start by getting a designated player number 9, Robert Beric, Nemanja Nikolic type of build, and then whenever Shaqiri can hit the road and move on, that they'll be better off. But it's disgusting. It's embarrassing. It is loathsome. That's the word I've got for it.
Even Colorado's owners have come out and said that they're going to spend more money.
Yeah.
And that's saying something. No, I agree with you. I mean, that is, I hate to take the side of the pro rellers, but that's a product of not having any pressure to get sent down a league. Is you can sit there and say it'll take some time, just give us some time and we'll figure it out.
Well, and if I can build on this just one more time is the problem with this is not, oh, all the pro rollers were right. It's that now that they think they're right because they have their one thing they're going to hang their hat on. Because that's how the arguments always work. It's the we don't watch the league, but here's one thing that happened that I'm going to hang on to the day I die to prove my point. And that's what Chicago just did is give everybody who says there's no, we just fired 12 managers in 1 year, right? For not being good enough. Nobody's going to look at that when they look over and say, "Oh, look at Chicago, look what they did," right? It's shifting the direction of what we're trying to do and the direction we're trying to go and the focus we're trying to put on our improvement, and it's taking it back 20 years. It's awful.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely the exception, but it's not a good look, as you said. My, I mean, I don't even want to say my last point after that one. I think that was a really good one to end off on. But my last point that I had noted down here was to back the coach. And I'm not. I want to start this off by saying that I'm not saying Ezra Hendrickson was the right man for the job, or that the club was wrong for sacking him. But doing it 10 games into the season was a big risk, and it ultimately did not pay off for them. Now an interim or new manager has to come in with a team he had no say in and try to make things work. If you had given him at least the offseason to build the team in their method, there may have been better results. And it wasn't like Chicago was far from the playoffs. This could have been the difference between them being a playoff team and not being a playoff team. I think Chicago improved after Hendrickson was gone, but they never really hit the levels that they needed to fully turn around the season and make the expanded playoffs. I think the solution now is to fill that head coach void, hopefully earlier in this offseason, and then let him bring in the players that he wants in the offseason. Then give him some time to learn the league a bit and make things work. I think patience is key. Not to the level of patience that the Chicago front office is looking for, but like some level of patience here.
And yeah, at the end of the day, nothing we say or do is going to change Chicago. They've made their decision. They're going to stick by it. However, if they don't make the right changes and bring Chicago where they belong in a league that is very difficult to do that nowadays because of what we just talked about with the DP fails and the roster restrictions that make it difficult to be successful like that. I mean, you might lose whatever fading support you have left. If I just really quick before we go here, um, home attendance in MLS for 2023.
It was not good.
They were worse than Red Bull.
Yeah.
Now, granted, they had an average of 18,000. Um, if I look at them really quickly here, uh, this is a pretty neat website. I might need to spend more time on here. Yeah, can't find it. Anyways, I guess one thing on. Oh yeah, there. That's what I was looking for. They were bolstered a little bit by one game against an Inter Miami side where they had
Mhm.
62,000 people show up. So that bumped them a little bit higher than expected. But again, you're looking at a team realistically, right? Take that away, balance it out. You're looking probably closer to 26th, 27th in the league. It's just not a good look for a team that's looking to hold on to relevance right now.
Yeah.
So definitely going to be interested to see what moves are made. It's a team I'm going to keep an eye on for the next couple of months here because they've got to get this right. They've got all this heat on them right now. They have to get this right. If they don't get it right, they're in trouble.